How's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here with the latest and the greatest gaming news. Today I'm going to be breaking down one of the biggest talking points and debates regarding Starfield, because ever since Starfield was announced, the community has been wondering and speculating over whether or not this game will indeed feature aliens, and there are a few different routes that Bethesda Game Studios can take if they do plan on implementing aliens into Starfield. And in today's video I plan on breaking down all the different ways that Bethesda Game Studios can actually implement aliens into Starfield. It basically boils down to 4 different scenarios. I'll break each scenario down as well as giving you my thoughts on how likely each one would be. And on top of all this, I'll also provide any actual evidence there might be regarding whether or not aliens will be in Starfield. And that's where we're gonna get started in today's video, because regarding any confirmable information about whether or not aliens will be in this game is probably the topic with the least content that will be in this video, because there basically isn't anything. There is nothing out there to date to confirm that aliens will be in Starfield, but at the same time, there's no evidence that 100% directly confirms they won't be either. It is definitely a possibility, because even in Bethesda Game Studios' post-apocalyptic game, there tends to be varied and interesting races. However, there aren't any playable different races other than being a human in Fallout, so it's very likely that you might only play as a human in Starfield also. However, the Elder Scrolls has a ton of races, even beyond the multiple playable ones that exist in the game universe. There are so many different races in the Elder Scrolls universe that it's hard to literally keep track of all of them, and most people don't even know about some of the less known about and rare ones, and there are some pretty interesting extinct ones as well. So given Bethesda Game Studios' previous history, they can go like either way with Starfield. They can do the Fallout thing where humans are the only race in the game and you can only play as a human, or they can go the route to where there are a ton of different races, different aliens in the game, and you can even play as an alien. However, the only real information we have as to whether or not Starfield will have aliens is just kind of speculating off statements Todd Howard made regarding Starfield's tone. He said numerous times it's going to be like less focused on the space fantasy magic style sci-fi game, kind of like how Star Wars is, and it'll be more focused on epic science fiction. Todd Howard mentions this in an interview with IGN back in August 2020, and he specifically says this will be like the biggest, hugest, most epic science fiction game you could ever imagine. And also Todd Howard has been talking to Elon Musk and asking him for any advice on Starfield's universe and the science and technology they would use in a game, so that's even more evidence that Starfield will be more focused on maybe more believable sci-fi rather than just like space magic stuff. But it could still be a blend of both, and even if it is more focused on like the more believable technology-focused science fiction kind of sci-fi, that doesn't mean aliens won't be in the game, because aliens could be in the game and they could have the technology that is so advanced it seems like magic. That could be a theme Bethesda goes with. However, like I said earlier in the video, there isn't much evidence one way or another to confirm if aliens will or will not be in Starfield, and basically Todd Howard's statements about the game's tone are all we have to go off of. However, like I said, there are 4 different routes Bethesda can take regarding how aliens might be implemented into Starfield, at least in terms of my own perspective and opinion. I've played a lot of sci-fi and space games, both computer games and tabletop. I'm familiar with a lot of different game universes with different alien races, and at the same time I'm very familiar with Bethesda Game Studios, their staff, and even some of the art that I believe might directly influence the visuals and the design for characters and stuff in Starfield. And speaking of that, there is one kind of speculative piece of evidence suggesting aliens might be in Starfield, and that is a game developer that actually used to work on and designing the aliens in Mass Effect actually is working at Bethesda Game Studios in Maryland right now, which means that someone with experience directly working with and designing aliens in RPG games is actually working at Bethesda Game Studios. So even though that doesn't really confirm anything, it's just a little bit of that speculation salt evidence that could potentially lean towards aliens being in Starfield. But let's move away from that topic and let's get to the 4 different ways I think this might all go down if aliens are in the game. And we're going to start with the first one. Aliens might not be in Starfield. This is indeed one of the potential things that could happen. Aliens might not be in this game, and personally I think that would be the least exciting option, and that's why I think it's also the least likely thing that Bethesda Game Studios could do with all the different things I'm going to be listing in this video. I don't think aliens will not be in Starfield. I believe aliens will be in Starfield in at least one of the other 3 ways I'll list in this video, because if they're not, the game would feel totally empty. It would feel like you're just playing Myst but in space with a Bethesda Game Studios tone, and that would mean humans and robots would probably be the only enemies in the game, unless they're like a weird version of mutated humans or some kind of like ancient aliens robots somewhere kind of like dwarven technology, but I kind of doubt Bethesda would go with that route, because that would seem kind of redundant, and like I said, Bethesda Game Studios not implementing aliens into Starfield would be the least exciting option, and the community would probably not be too happy about that. I'm sure Bethesda Game Studios kind of knows that, and if it's the most epic science fiction thing we can ever imagine, which is what Todd Howard has said directly, I kind of believe aliens would have to be involved somehow. Which takes us to our next possibility. Number 2. Aliens are kind of in Starfield, but they are kind of like a relic of the past, and a good example to use of this is perhaps how Protheans are in the Mass Effect universe, at least in the first Mass Effect game. Eventually you meet a Prothean and blah 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 blah, but essentially, at the introduction of the Mass Effect universe, Protheans were an ancient alien race that, like, mysteriously disappeared, and the different races would find, like, different artifacts of their technology that they could reverse engineer for huge advancements in their own technology. And this is one of the ways that Bethesda can choose to implement aliens into Starfield. Aliens in themselves may not exist in the game at all, but we may see their relics and their ruins, and maybe have to fight their old ancient-like security robots or sentinels or whatever. Like I said, that would seem kind of redundant, like the old dwarven ruins in Skyrim with their own version of their ancient protective robots. I think that would be kind of redundant if something like that happened again in Starfield. And while this is more likely than aliens not being in Starfield at all, I still think it's less likely than them actually being in the game physically. I believe aliens will most likely be in the game physically, which takes us to our third possibility of what Bethesda Game Studios can do here, which is aliens are indeed in Starfield, but they're kind of rare and uncommon. There might be only like 1 to 3 different races, each with its own unique and diverse culture. One of the races could be heavily military based and could be one of the antagonists in the game. Another could be very weak, but very like wise and honorable, and you may have to help protect this race from the evil race. And a third race could be powerful, but very, very neutral and withdrawn. And in order to save both humanity and the actual benevolent alien race, you would have to try to enlist the help of the third neutral race. So that could kind of like implement a sort of space Game of Thrones kind of vibe. And if there are like less than 5 alien races in Starfield, I believe that would be the best case scenario, because if they add like 10 different freaking races, that might make things seem a little less deep and maybe just a little bit too widespread. However, that might not be the case, because there are some sci-fi universes that have a lot of different races and it's all balanced very well and very, very interesting. That'll be the fourth talking point that I'll get to, but in terms of this one, I believe that Starfield will most likely have just a handful of alien races, and I don't know if you'll be able to play as any of them. Maybe Bethesda Game Studios can add replayability to Starfield to where if you actually beat the game you can play as a different race. However, that would take a lot of extra development time, because then each race would have to have its own kind of like prologue introduction to the game and very early quest chain that kind of just migrates you into the majority of the game world, into the open game world like kind of early Dragon Age games did, to where you would start out in your own kind of starting zone based upon your race and your backstory, and then things would just progress from there, and then you would just get to the meat and potatoes of the game that every other choice would eventually get to anyway. But Bethesda Game Studios unfortunately doesn't do stuff like that. The only replayability factor you get from their games is about making different choices in the game, unless obviously we're talking about the Elder Scrolls, in which there is a bit of replayability because there's so many different races. But like I said, I believe Starfield will have aliens, but I believe it'll be limited to a few different races, and I kinda don't know if you'll be able to play as an alien race, at least in the first Starfield. Maybe in the second Starfield you'll be able to play as one of the races you met in the first game, but I believe that the first Starfield game will be focused on humanity's introduction into the greater scope of the universe, including meeting these new alien races for the first time. It might be a little bit too much for the player to meet new races for the first time and then play as them and then try to immerse yourself into the game as this race you know nothing about from the start. However, that's something other games do anyway, so that might not be a valid point. But let's move on to the fourth and final way Bethesda Game Studios could choose to implement aliens into Starfield. And that's something that I just mentioned in the last topic I was talking about, which was there could be numerous upon numerous different aliens in the game. Kinda like how BioWare handled Mass Effect. There were a ton of races in the game, even beyond the playable ones, which reminds me a bit of the Elder Scrolls, and both of those franchises do a very good job with their worlds, including all the different playable races. If Starfield has a ton of aliens in the game, like 10 different races plus, I would imagine there would be like maybe 5 to 7 or 8 playable races, and then maybe like 4 to 5 additional, just more varied and exotic style of aliens that you wouldn't be able to play as, similar to the Hanar or the Elcor in Mass Effect. If there are so many different alien races in the game, we would probably see strange and exotic styles of aliens, which is one of the pluses that we would get if there are numerous different aliens in a game. If there's only a handful of races, I think that might limit the potential for those alien races to be more humanoid-based, but that just might be some sort of off-base speculation. But if there's like 10 different alien races, we will definitely see some weird stuff, and I kinda would want to see what Bethesda Game Studios would do with this. It would be interesting to see how they would handle making so many different varied alien races with all their different backstories, all their different history, because Bethesda has said that Starfield will be as deep as both Elder Scrolls and Fallout in terms of lore and the world building. So if there are numerous different races in Starfield, each race would probably be super interesting, just like the different Elder Scrolls races are. However, even though I think this would be pretty amazing, I think it's far less likely than there only being a limited amount of alien races. I don't think there's going to be 10. I think that might be more likely in future Starfield sequels, but I believe in a first Starfield game, it'll just be like a small handful of aliens, and I don't know if we'll be able to play as any of them. It would be cool, like I said, for you to be able to play as one of these races if you beat Starfield as a human, but that's just me saying something that could be cool. There's no way to indicate whether that's going to be the case, and like I said, this is mostly all speculation. However, I do a lot of research into Bethesda Game Studios and their developers and how they usually go about their development process and who they have on staff and what their skill sets are, and all these different options I listed in this video are based on all these years upon years of investigations for this channel. As always though, keep in mind these are just my thoughts on what we might see in Starfield, and as always, what I want to know is what do you think we're going to see in Starfield? Which of the things I listed are your favorite, and how would you like aliens to be implemented into Starfield if you even want them to be in the game? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn notifications on so you don't miss the latest uploads. And if you want to help grow the channel and the community, be sure to share this video, as sharing content and videos is like the 100% best way to help grow a channel and a community. And this video is brought to you by the following amazing people. If you want to get a personal video shout out like this in future videos, you can support the channel over on Ko-fi, Patreon, or here on YouTube as an exclusive channel member. Links for all these things and more are down in the description below, and as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time, when as always, thank you for watching.
It just works.